Elliot sat in his tiny studio, staring at the unfinished vase on the wheel. The clay was dry, cracking under his touch. His hands hovered over it, but he couldn't bring himself to spin the wheel. The screen of his phone lit up on the table. He picked it up, scrolling through post after post, sleek photos of polished pots, interviews with rising stars in the pottery world, perfectly lit galleries with rows of flawless ceramics. A classmate from art school was headlining an exhibit. Another was selling pots for hundreds of dollars each. They smiled in their photos, radiant with the success Elliot craved. He put the phone down and stared at the vase again. It looked like failure. That night he went to see Henry, his old mentor. Henry lived on the edge of the city, his studio a chaotic mix of clay-streaked tools and half-formed bowls. Elliot slumped into a chair. "I can't take it anymore, Henry. They're all out there making it, and I'm stuck. Everything I make feels empty." Henry didn't say anything at first. He walked to his workbench, picked up a small lump of clay, and handed it to Elliot. "Feel that," he said. Elliot turned the clay over in his hands. It was cool and damp, pliable but solid. Henry smiled. "Let me tell you a story. Once, there was a potter who worked at the foot of a great mountain. His bowls were plain, his jars simple. He was good, but he envied others. Their glazes sparkled, their pots sold for gold. One day, as he dug for fresh clay by the river, he unearthed a strange lump of clay, smooth and warm. When he held it, it felt alive, and a voice whispered, 'What do you wish to become?' The potter laughed, the sound bitter in his throat. 'I want to be a wealthy merchant,' he said. In a blink, the river and the clay disappeared. He found himself dressed in fine robes, surrounded by rare silks and glimmering jewels. He sat behind a stall as people crowded around to buy his wares. At first the potter was thrilled, but then the sun grew hotter. He could feel the sweat dripping down his back, the silk clinging to his skin. He looked up at the blazing sky and cursed its heat. The clay in his hand whispered again, 'What do you wish to become?' 'I wish to be the sun,' he said. He felt himself rise, his body expanding into brilliant light. He stretched across the heavens, burning with power. He scorched fields, dried rivers, and glowed with unrelenting intensity. But then a shadow passed over him. A great cloud moved in front of his light, blocking him from the earth below. The clay whispered, 'What do you wish to become?' 'I wish to be the cloud,' he said. He felt his body soften, stretching into the sky. He rolled across the heavens, unleashing torrents of rain and booming thunder. Rivers overflowed, and fields flooded beneath his might. But then he saw the mountain standing firm, unshaken by his storms. No flood could move it. No thunder could frighten it. The clay whispered one last time, 'What do you wish to become?' 'I wish to be the mountain,' he said. He felt himself harden, his body vast and immovable. He stood tall, watching the world below, unmoved by the winds, the rain, or the sun. For a time he believed he had found the greatest power of all. But one day he heard a faint scraping sound. Tap, tap, tap. At his base a potter was carving clay from his side, shaping it into something new. For the first time he understood. The mountain, the cloud, the sun, all were part of the same cycle. The potter was neither greater nor lesser, but essential. He looked down at the lump of clay in his hand. He let it go. When he returned to his wheel, his hands moved with ease, and his heart felt light. Elliot turned the lump of clay over in his hands. So what did it mean? The potter didn't need the clay to change his life? Henry shrugged. You tell me. Elliot went back to his studio that night. The unfinished vase sat on the wheel, its surface dry and cracked. He grabbed a fresh lump of clay, dampened his hands, and set the wheel spinning. At first the clay wobbled under his fingers, uneven and stubborn. But as he pressed gently, the shape began to form. His hands moved in rhythm with the wheel, guiding the clay into a smooth curve. Time disappeared. The studio filled with the earthy smell of wet clay and the soft whir of the wheel. By dawn, a bowl sat on the wheel. Its edges were imperfect, its walls uneven, but Elliot smiled. It wasn't about the bowl. He turned the wheel off, his hands caked in clay. The studio was quiet, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't bother him.